Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Kia ora, Big Hairy Chewy. You right there, love?
Kia ora, Matthew. How are you?
Kia ora. Really busy. We're really busy. This is the kind of day that if we did a 2-hour show, it would make more sense. Of course, if we did a 2-hour show, that would mean it's a 2-hour, 45-minute show, but because we couldn't do that. Because there's so much. There's a couple of big stories today that we might have a chat about now, just a casual chin wag. But I haven't prepped them for tonight, and we probably look at doing them tomorrow. But firstly, going well. What a fantastic day in Dunedin it was today. Utterly, it's so strange. One of my kids said to me, "What a beautiful day, Dad." And I went, "Yep." And she goes, "And it was snowing yesterday." I'm like, "Yeah, there was a bit of sleet in there." So yesterday there was snow and sleet in there. Today it was a perfectly fine day and 17 degrees. Welcome to Dunedin. But it was a cracker. Dog up the park. It's great.
I got to say, I've had a bit of a mixed bag. Yes, it was a gorgeous day, but I got to see a little bit of fucking just ugliness today. There's look, I wouldn't say homeless. There's maybe a partially housed person that sits on George Street here, quite near to where I work.
Rough sleeping? That's what people often call them.
I don't think so, but
okay.
I think they have somewhere to go. It is. I don't want to give away too many identifying.
Fair
about them, but they cop a bit of abuse from just mouthy teenagers and that sort of thing, and they respond. They bite pretty hard on that, and I stuck my head out and saw it, and it wasn't the school kids this time. It was an adult just giving this person shit and just really stirring them up. And you know that whole bystander effect. You're like, this doesn't involve me. I don't want it. I don't subscribe to that. So I walked over to the guy and I was like, "Hey man, just leave him alone. He's not harming anybody. He's just sitting there minding his business. Just leave him alone." And this guy was like, "Nah, why should he sit there?" And I'm just like, "Man, what's going on?
Because he's allowed?
What's going on? Yeah, what's going on in your life that you have to make yourself feel better by picking on someone that's having a rough time?"
Yeah.
And the answer in that is to tell me to fuck off and threaten to punch me in the mouth.
Did you have work gear on?
No, I did.
Oh, nice.
So I wasn't really keen to have a scrap in the middle of George Street. But that sort of comment just came to me in the moment of like, what's going wrong in your life to the point where you need to pick on someone that's so low? And I think that translates quite well into what we've been talking about almost consistently for 12 months. And that we have a government that seems to consistently want to shit on people having a hard time already as a way to make other people feel better about their lot in life.
Yeah. No,
maybe that's why I do this, right? Because I can't stand by and just go, it's the way things are, and what can I change, and that sort of thing. Just out of that one little moment in the street today.
I have always kind of been someone who just, not that I've got a lot to go around, but gives people money. And I remember when I was a young fella living in central Auckland on K Road, there used to be a hotspot around the Lost Angels, the name of a cafe up there, where there were a lot of street walkers and, sex workers and that kind of stuff. And I'd often walk past them and go, "You cold?" And they'd go, that offer other services. And I don't know, "Are you cold? Do you want a drink?" And we'd go to the cafe, we'd come back and bring them a coffee or a hot chocolate or something on the way through. And just in the last couple of weeks, actually, I've made a decision that there's some people in my area, similar to what you're saying, who are always sitting outside a retail establishment. And I've decided that if I'm walking out of the supermarket to my car and it's parked by them, and if I've got money, I'm just going to give it to them. And I know it can be controversial for some people, because some people will think they're in the middle of an addictive episode. You give them money, it's going to go straight on stuff that will harm them. But I'm like, I actually don't necessarily negate that. But I also think if they're that far gone, then they'll probably kick the shop's window in that night and steal something to sell to get the money to then do that anyway. And I've just made the decision. I'm just gonna, if I've got $2 in my pocket or $5 in my pocket, and I've kind of got a little rule for myself. I don't park there to either avoid them or interact with them. Like if I park around the other side because that's where I have to park, I typically don't. But if it's appropriate and I stop there and they're there, I just try and do it. I try and do it every time because, and funnily enough, we're talking about poverty tonight. This is quite a good lead in actually, I guess, Joey, not that we're going to do it right now. I spoke to a doctor this afternoon, and he is the chair of the Māori Health Committee, Dr. Matt Wheeler, and he's been speaking out in the press this week about how the Treaty Principles Bill, Act, referendum, whichever it's going to be, reading, is damaging to Māori health outcomes. And I'm like, well, that's quite interesting because we hear about things like co-governance, we hear about things like, ceding sovereignty or tino rangatiratanga, but I haven't really heard someone articulate how this legislation could harm Māori health in particular. Maybe it's because I'm naive, I'm not entirely sure about it. So I had a chat with him this afternoon, and it was really interesting. And within the middle of that conversation, he talked about a topic. I am going to keep my powder dry because I'm going to show you something else later on tonight. But he talked about a topic about why people in poverty, and putting it bluntly, right, not in a judging way, because he says this in a TED talk, why they make bad choices. And we're going to look at that tonight. We're going to look at the research he's talking about, and then we're going to talk to the doctor. Then after we talk to the doctor, we're going to have a look at the research that he mentions in the interview with me, because I was fascinated by it. And it's not a topical thing, but I think it's really interesting to look at. And it's going to be quite a long clip, and it's probably not going to be hey, let's jump in there and say something pithy about someone with a bald head. But I think might be one of those videos that you all find really useful, because it's an informative video, even if we just watch 7 minutes together and then that's the end of the show. I don't know. So yeah, so I'm quite looking forward to sharing stuff with you. Not always looking forward to it, but tonight it feels like we've got a little. We all of us, me included, all have a little, 10-minute lecture time from a professional talking to us about poverty, and then we've also got another 25-minute lecture time from a doctor talking to us about the treaty referendum and how it impacts Māori health. But I want to share something else with you, Troy. I'd like to share something at the start of the show. This is not a good thing. It's actually an annoying thing. It's the kind of thing that will fire up Mount Vesuvius, is that what we call it?
Right. So let me just prepare myself.
Yeah.
It's not good, and it's quite annoying, and we're going to lead with that.
Yes,
okay,
here
cool.
we go.
So we're on brand.
Saw this from a couple of days ago, came up on my feed today from the BSA. BSA said this on Twitter. We still get complaints about the use of te reo on TV and radio. It's no breach of standards to use a national language, and we no longer consider such complaints. Kua mutu te BSA, te tiro, muamu, moti reo Māori. See our 2021 statement in Māori and English. So the BSA, the Broadcasting Standards Authority, that's like a complaints group for people who don't know, across radio and television. If you think that standards have been breached, like if an afternoon host on ZB mocks, talks down, screams at a teenage activist, for example, that kind of breach of standards. This is the place you go to. They're a little bit of a toothless monster, but they are. It is sort of the system that's been set up. And yeah, in 2024, the BSA gets complaints that are literally just they spoke Māori. That's the complaint on the BSAs.
I saw that pop up on my feed, and I was just like, really? And then I thought about it, and I was like, of fucking course.
Yeah.
There's someone so incensed by a tiny little bit of slow that they are going to hammer out an email, or I guess get out the typewriter, or maybe handwrite in cursive a letter to the BSA.
Hey, don't be harsh about cursive. Be nice to cursive. I like cursive. Okay, we've got what we're going to do is we're going to start with the working group. The working group last night had a good old scrap about the treaty principles bill, and then we're going to go and talk to the doctor, and then out the back of the doctor we're going to talk about this situation about why people in poverty and how does poverty impact people and what's the solution. It's involving a TED talk. It's in the description of this video if you're watching us on YouTube. The whole thing, we're going to play a bit of that as well. Two other quick things. Thank you if you are a patron of ours. If you are a patron of ours, you also got early access to the conversation that we're going to have tonight. There it is right there, Dr. Matt Wheeler, on how the Treaty Principles Bill impacts Māori health. So one of the benefits you get from being a patron. I'll be honest, most of the 300 plus patrons support us just because they want to support us, because they want us to be able to buy a new video card when our computer goes, time to blow one. So if you want to be a part of that, if you want early access, if you want to be able to come along to the meetups, hopefully next year, Chewy, we'll get to do some IRL meetups. We'll do like an Auckland weekend and a Wellington weekend and a Christchurch weekend and actually meet people in real life, maybe other places as well.
Crazy.
So yeah, thank you for that. The other two very quick things are, there's two stories we're not really going to touch base on tonight, but I'm chomping at the bit to touch base on them. The first is we found out, of course, that our health czar is a part-time worker, something like $320,000 salary, and he works 3 days a week.
Even better than that, Pat. He's got 2 jobs.
Yep.
He's got 2 jobs. If you were on some sort of job seeker benefit and had 2 part-time jobs, they would sanction you and take some of your money away.
Yep.
But apparently the wrong end of the scale.
Yep. And the other story, which sounds like a small story, but I think it's indicative. It's like the quintessential dictionary definition of what this national government's all about. And that's this one: Manawatū highway toll proposal, a kick in the guts. It's a kick in the guts, Trev. Now, it's a kick in the guts for many reasons. One of the reasons is this road is already basically done. That means it has already been paid for. That means under a Labour government, it was built and paid for. And once it's a finished product, these guys are going, we're going to toll it. And I think in this article, we're not going to play it now, the CE of Wakakotahi basically went, we have to do it. It's the new parameters by this government that we have to do it. That's the first thing. It's been paid for. These guys talking of double dipping, maybe that's a part of their MO. And the second thing is, if you voted for National in Wairarapa, and Kieran lost his seat, he's still obviously a list MP, but if you voted for the National dude, we warned you, as to these kinds of things going to happen. And if you voted for the National guy and you're in Wairarapa, then you voted for this. So good on you, Cobber. You want to touch on any of those things super quick, Chewy?
Yeah, just like it's normally you'd think the toll road would be like a slightly faster way, like an extra road. We don't need it. But it would make it better, and if you want the faster journey on the nicer road, you just pay a toll, and it just helps spread the load.
Yep.
In this particular case, it is not an extra road; it is a replacement for a mothballed, dangerous road.
Yeah.
So it doesn't meet that criteria, and the fact that it's built and budgeted for already, so the tolls are not to offset the cost of it; it's already been done. So it's just a cash grab.
There to offset landlords' reimbursements and tax cuts. And look, Chewy, I wasn't quite as clear on that as you. I often talk about Northland because I spent a lot of time in Northland. And you go to Northland, when I was a kid, you'd go through Orewa and you'd travel north to Northland. And now there's a bypass over the back. But if you don't want to pay the toll, Chewy, you can still go through Orewa. It's a bit longer and it's a bit more scenic, but you don't have to pay. I think a toll road in New Zealand, that is an essential part of it. It has to be a choice. It can't be the only way you get there. They said on the news tonight that for cars it was going to be like $350, and for trucks and stuff it was going to be double. And they were talking about potentially a couple of $1,000s a year. Yeah, no new taxes though, Chewy. Yeah. See, it's not a new tax, Chewy. It's a toll. I know they both begin with T, but they're very, very different.
Like I remember, what is it? The Littleton Tunnel in Christchurch, that used to be a toll. The Auckland Harbour Bridge used to be a toll.
Yep.
It's definitely not without precedence, but the fact that they are doing it on a road where there is no other option, is just cool. Stay in your area.
Same as the bridge in Tauranga had a toll on it, but what they do is they put a toll on it. I can just remember the tolls on Auckland Harbour Bridge. I was too young. There's a blur in maybe I was 2 years old or something. I don't know. But then once the bridge is paid for, the tolls go away. This is the opposite. This is the bridge road has been paid for. Now we're going to toll you. I actually think it's a small story about one part of New Zealand, but it's an essential story about the way these guys operate. So, All right, so we're gonna get into that probably tomorrow night. Maybe I'll fire Kieran a text and see if he wants to come on. I'm sure he would want to if he has the ability. Kiwi Bird, that's the Patman and Super Chewy helping the homeless. All right, $2 from okay. Next time, no problems. Anna says, "Cool, they've made it live, but late. We were just waiting for you, Anna. We haven't really started yet. We're just waiting for you." Lurchify, thank you for the $20 super. That's very generous. From today is Ray L. Oh, I gotcha.
That's Ray L.
Yeah, gotcha. Is a vulgar state. They plumb new depths of inhumanity. The Biden administration is guilty by active support. Indiscriminate, explosive, and a mass distribution of pager devices is pure evil. Yeah, look, that's what I'm saying. There's so many news stories at the moment. I want to say we'll pick up on that tomorrow as well, but who knows what tomorrow's news is going to be. But the biggest thing about what Lurchy's just said there, which I agree with, is it's the sorry for the trope, but it's the women and children. You see those things blowing up in the middle of a market and indiscriminately hitting the people around them. We don't even need to get into the conversation as are they at war with Hezbollah or not. That will be the thing that's debated by both sides. But how about the hundreds of people that have nothing to do with Hezbollah who are also injured today by what everyone is saying, although I don't think they've owned it, what everyone is saying is the actions of Israel. Chewy.
Oh, look, this is Mossad all over it. I had a couple of thoughts, and look, I haven't dived deep into this story. There may be details that I'm missing. But I find this really interesting because the Israeli regime reckons the only way to get rid of Hamas in Gaza is to fucking carpet bomb the whole stuff and keep on dropping 1,000-pound bombs on schools and tent cities and that sort of thing. I noticed that the health authority from Gaza released a 900+ page report detailing all the details of the people that have died, and the first 9 pages of that are children under 1.
Wow.
So remember, they have no other. These are just the tools that they have to combat Hamas. There's no other way that we can be more surgical or precise.
Yeah.
And yet the other side of it, they were somehow able to weaponize the pages of people in Hamas in a completely different country.
Well, do you know what happened? The stories talk about that. They intercepted a group of pages that were going in, and they took a box of them out and they filled them with explosives and they put them back in and sent them on. So that's how they actually did it. But I think one of the ones there was people related to members of Hezbollah who also got hit because it was like, Hezbollah dude gives it to his mother-in-law or whatever, and she's got it on her, and so it is still indiscriminate. Absolutely. Interesting what Luigi says. Just look at this. I didn't know this. The last super chat had to be edited to remove reference to the Z word, and I word before it would send. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Z word and I word. Look, if another country's government blows up a whole lot of people in a second country, that's a terrorist attack.
Yeah.
Like, however you cut it, Israel is not at war with Syria currently. They also blew up an ambassador.
But they're trying.
So it's bizarre.
Right. Hey, listen, I'm going to pause us there because it's almost 20 past already. We haven't started the show yet. We're still in the preamble.
I'll shut that
so we will get onto these in the next wee while. Let's jump straight to the working group. This is quite a long clip as well. So yeah, we'll see how these work out. And really, they've been talking about the treaty principles, Bill. They've been talking about, what are the principles? Damien Grant did as usual. There's no principles. You can't find them anywhere. And we get to a part where Bomber asks a question that we ask a lot. Do you believe the experts? Do you trust the experts? Or do you trust, what do we say? You racist Uncle Bob from Nelson? I think Bomber actually talks about Fat Bob from the pub doing surgery on you. And that's where we kind of pick up the conversation.
Why would I trust fat bloke down pub
Fat bloke
to do my brain surgery?
I thought you were a lefty, very elitist.
Why would I trust fat bloke down pub to do brain surgery on my daughter?
Can I tell you?
Or why would I trust fat bloke down pub to give me the basics of how gravity...
So we're talking about democracy, and the point of democracy is that everyone gets to take part.
But everyone is.
But not everyone gets to decide from the top down what means what. Everyone gets to participate in it, meaning they can offer an opinion and they can, they can vote. It doesn't mean everyone gets involved in deciding what legislation is. Not everyone gets involved in writing legislation. So, think twice.
It's getting to say that, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is that there is no reason that we can't have a conversation. Now, I personally don't think this has been done the right way. Like I said, I had a real issue with the interpretation of Article 2, which is much more faithful to it now. But I think it's still something we need to talk about. We need to go, okay, as a country, we have to go into the future together, and if we don't discuss these issues and find a resolution in which we're faithful to the treaty, but also to the fact that we're a modern country and a modern democracy.
Why would Māori accept the ACT Party redefining it for
Well, I just said that.
Can I also say, I mean, we all know about Annie O'Brien. We know about her positions, and if you ever see her Twitter feed about the transgender community and that kind of stuff. And this is like, we all have to get along and move forward together. And the right at the moment in America is talking about political rhetoric. What I would say to Annie O'Brien is, how about you fucking model that first of all? How about before you try and convince all of us that we have to go forward together, you fucking model it, because your Twitter feed is toxic. And it's toxic, and it's got vicious commentary at it aimed at vulnerable people. So how about you fucking model it, and then come back and have the conversation about us all moving forward together? How about that? How about them apples?
Would Māori accept the ACT Party redefining it for?
Well, I just said I don't think that's the vehicle for it.
Can I tell you why that argument is fundamentally flawed from just my Māori perspective, and maybe I'm culturally elite. My maunga will always be my maunga. My awa will always be my awa. My pepeha will always be what it will be, and that's not a conversation that I'm willing to enter into with anybody. Actually, it's a treaty right. It's my birthright, and the reality is that for my kroa, my kuia, and my nanny, that wasn't. So until we entered into treaty settlements that I think have brought this country into good stead overall. Look, the treaty, Te Tiriti, is a document that lives beyond the scope of one government, and try to change the context and legal status is a political challenge that I think is well beyond the scope of this particular government.
But we're not talking about treaty settlements here, though, are we? We are talking about, we come to the end, not that we have, but we come to the end of the treaty settlements. And what is being pushed now is taking, okay, we have addressed the issues of confiscation of land and violation of property rights.
So we paid out.
So it's kind of just hand waving that away. The confiscation.
We've done it.
That's done. Well, we don't have to worry about that anymore.
Confiscation of land and violation of property rights.
So we paid our dues. We paid our dues. Let's move on.
So once that is done, there is an argument now being advanced that there are separate economic and political rights.
Correct.
That exist as a consequence of somebody's whakapapa.
Yes.
Now that is the issue that is being advanced currently by some individuals. And there are other people who are saying, well, hold on a minute, I disagree with that.
Yeah.
And the principles are the mechanism by which the separation of New Zealand into separate economic and political class based on their DNA, that is how that extension has been happening. And there are many people, myself included, who think that the Treaty of Waitangi does not extend that far. Now, there are other people...
and again, there's a good bit coming up here when they talk about, and what these guys do, and Damien in particular, it's all, why are they the experts? Who said they were the experts? Why are who made them experts? And we've said this before, and it might have even been in response to Damien Grant. Education, personal experience, lifespan, expertise in a particular area, and respectfully to Damien Grant, because I would say the same of me, compared to let's just use the name Professor Māori, jack shit about it. Much like if we were talking about brain surgery, compared to an actual brain surgeon, Damien Grant and Pat Brittenden, we know jack shit, so we default to the brain surgeon. We don't go, who made him the expert? Why is he the expert? And it's only because it's got these racial undertones and you want to take over the social commentary on this that you think you've got the right to say, wow, gravy train, that's not race. It's all about that. They're not experts. You want to add anything in yet, Chewy?
Damien Grant is talking a load of nonsense. I love that he's going, who are these experts? Who are you, mate?
Yeah.
Like, where is your grounding in this? You are a twice convicted fraudster. That should disqualify you from talking about this. You're a libertarian. You go on about property rights, but somehow you don't understand history. You don't understand that you can just hand wave away 150, 200 years of fuckery from colonial governments and just go, oh, everything's all better now. Reset the clock to zero. We're all on the same finishing line, and let's march into Annie O'Brien's glorious future where we're all the same. It just doesn't happen.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. We'll keep going because it's got about 3 minutes to go.
We believe that the treaty does extend that far. So you're reserving your rights unto yourself.
No, yeah.
That's great, but that does not mean, that is not the end of the discussion. That is not the end of the argument.
But the fundamental point is that we do not cede our sovereignty.
There you go. And that is
not accepted.
We didn't. Well, it might not
Well,
be.
it's not accepted by Hobson's pledge when they're trying to paint a narrative of how the English version is correct, or take little words out of Te Tiriti and say this is what it means. Like Don Brash telling you what this is what it means versus a Māori language scholar and expert. I think I'll know where I'll put my my trust in with that one.
Accepted by you. And it's accepted by me and many other people. And the other thing is, okay, 60% of people might support David Seymour's bill. Hey, man, I marched the streets when only 10% of people supported sports boycotts to South Africa.
Yeah.
Things change, and I'm just not going
But
I'm not going to be battened down by the tyranny of the majority. I'll still argue, even if it's a minority argument.
Here's my point.
Yeah, this is very good, right? So we love watching Bomber open the door for the conversation. When he wants to go, he goes, and it's a great point by Marty.
And Māori are used to that.
Here's my point to the three of you.
Yeah.
You have a situation where the indigenous people of the country did not sign sovereignty, did not cede sovereignty.
Again, there is dispute about that. That's the problem.
And let me go into that. There were two treaties, right? English, Māori version. Yeah. We are signed up to UN declarations that state when a treaty is signed in two different languages, you have to take the indigenous language.
Which
right?
we do.
Right? And so in that indigenous language version, they didn't cede sovereignty. Now, hold on. I'm not saying the New Zealand Crown isn't sovereign. Of course it's sovereign. Yep. And how is it sovereign? By two simple ways, people. Osmosis, they've got the taxes, they've got the police, they've got the judiciary, they're the state. And also the second reason you can say that they've got sovereignty is because every treaty signed that's been signed off, the iwi or hapu have to acknowledge the sovereignty of Aotearoa, right? Now, the principles were an attempt. You're right. It doesn't say co-management in the bloody treaty, but what they did is they got the smartest people together and said, how are we going to run this if the indigenous people didn't cede sovereignty? And so they've come up with these principles of co-management, of working together.
Who's they?
And who decided they were the smartest?
The judiciary and the people who are asked to look into this.
This is it. You need to stop reading random left-wing esoteric blog sites like your own and actually pay attention. If you look at what the judiciary has said, nowhere, anywhere has the judiciary said the principles of the treaty are A, B, C.
Because
no one's saying that.
The grey zone.
That was in Martin's argument.
Is this not a reason for us to have a conversation?
They left a grey zone so that those people who are pragmatic amongst Māori and Pākehā could work together, and not the ideologues who would then derail the entire situation.
You're
spending
biggest
$4 million
ideologue.
on
$4
a
million.
goddamn 6-month thing that won't go anywhere. And you dare to sit here and say that that's fair. That's bullshit, Damien. Absolute bullshit.
Bullshit.
Go
There you
off,
go.
King.
Yeah. So honestly, I started watching some clips from this morning, and I could have played 12, 13 minutes from it. I would just encourage you guys to go and check out the episode from last night. It was pretty good. But look, this is the thing. What Bomber said is completely right. The English treaty, right, the one written in English, actually means nothing. You know, it's a historical document that hang on the wall. The one written in Māori, Te Tiriti, is the only one that matters. Who's going to know better? Don Brash. What about David Seymour, who will not cite his experts when it comes to interpreting? He has not and will not mention any names as to the people who he has got his guidance from, right? So Damien Grant, Hobson's Pledge, David Seymour, or actual scholars in tikanga, in Māori language, historians, people who have spent their life understanding the words. There's a thing in the church word, and I'm sorry to reference this, but sometimes it's my knowledge from the past, called exegesis versus hermeneutics. And what that means is taking a word and its meaning, but also its meaning in the era. It's a really important thing to do when you're looking at historical text, understanding what it meant in the era. If people look up this era, right, the era we're in right now, and they look at the word fire that's written down in a script, well, unless they understand that some kids use that to mean it's good, unless they understand the context of how it's used today, they may not get the right translation. So we've got these academic scholars, we've got these historians, we've got experts in tikanga, we've got experts in Māori language, or you've got David Seymour, Damien Grant, and fucking Don Brash. Where are you putting your money? I know where I'm putting mine, Chewie.
Yeah, Don Brash isn't a dumb person. He's a very, very sharp mind. He has a lot of expertise in his field, which is not history, which is not the treaty.
Yeah.
He has got a bee in his bonnet. It's his personal fucking hobby. That Hobson said something that we're all one people, not written down anywhere, as so
no evidence
eloquently stated by Matthew Hooton a few weeks ago. And it's not a positive way forward for this country. And I think this discussion and the people in it illustrate a graphic point that people have ideological positions. Sometimes they're thinking of this stuff in a complete vacuum from an ideological point of view, and they're not giving it the historical context. They're not looking at it from a human point of view. Why would Māori cede sovereignty to 5,000 people? And the idea of a ruler chosen by God on the other side of the planet, there is no way that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And we've got two treaties. It's only very recently that if we talk about having a conversation in this country, right? It's only very recently, very, very recently that we have started talking about the fact that there are two treaties. One of them in Māori is correct, is the treaty by international agreement, as pointed out by the UN. And then we have a bad interpretation of it, potentially you could say a bad faith interpretation of it in English. But that's the one that we got told is the proper one.
Yeah.
And that's wrong. And until we can get on the same page and go, well, okay, let's have an honest discussion about the treaty, which we've tried a little bit, we are not ready to have this conversation. There is not enough education in the general population about New Zealand history, about the treaty, about Māori, non-Māori relations over the decades, about the historical wrongs done and what has been done to right those wrongs. The level of knowledge is not there. We can't have a good faith conversation. And that's why this is playing out. There are people that there are bad actors in this. They do not want to give up their superiority. They do not want to give up their land rights. They don't want to give up their economic benefits. We can't talk about these things from a position of good faith because there are so many people with their thumb on the scales.
Yeah. No, and just so you know, if you watched me with my camera, then I just took a screenshot of Bomber looking more and more like Karl Marx every day, and then I just texted it to Bomber, so we'll see if he responds to that text from Cliff. Anyway, Paula says, most importantly, the Crown signed the Māori text. They are bound by it. Mr. Arvid says, no, Annie, it's not a reason for us to have a debate because idiotic like you know shit all. You Laura Luma asked B word. Oof. Mr. Arvids is on fire tonight. He's been drinking some kind of Kool-Aid. Democracy would have been letting people vote on smoke free, but where that went, you idiotic Annie. All right, okay, we're going to move on only because we have an interview coming up, and I want to be able to play you both things still coming. We'll definitely come back to that. I might even see if Bon wants to come on tomorrow night. Now, this is Dr. Matt Wheeler. Dr. Matt Wheeler is the chair of the Māori Health Committee, and he's been speaking in the media this week about, what's the way to say it? Oh, about how the Treaty Principles Bill, which is sort of the theme for the whole show, it might end up being, is going to hamper Māori health, which is a different perspective, and I haven't really heard it talked about before, so I really wanted to talk to Matt Wheeler, so let's have hear from him now, and we'll be back with you after this has finished. I should probably put the fader up. That was pretty smooth until then. We'll try again, shall we? Here we go. I want to welcome to the show Dr. Matt Wheeler, who is the chair of the Māori Health Committee, to talk about the Treaty's Principle Bill. Kia ora, Matt. Thank you for joining us.
Kia ora.
I'm going to read a little article, part of an article that is will come out earlier this week on RNZ. It features some comments from you. Māori health leaders demand government kill the Treaty's Principle Bill. Just the first line says, Māori health leaders are calling on the government to scrap the Treaty Principles Bill, saying equitable healthcare is a fundamental right. I'm really interested to kind of pad this out a bit, because when a lot of us, maybe without the background, who aren't Māori, think about what we're hearing in the press, we think about things like, ceding sovereignty. We think about things like kawanatanga. We think about tēnei tiratanga, and you're coming at it from a health perspective. Can you unpack that a little bit for us and tell us how this relates specifically to health and Māori health?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things about the Treaty of Waitangi is when it was signed, it was saying that everyone was, Māori and non-Māori were going to be given sort of equal rights when they were necessarily seen and placed within the country. And so one of those equal rights, or what we call taonga, was essentially considered health, and there has actually been a Treaty of Waitangi claim to that effect. So it's Y2575. And so Y2575 says that there's been systematic underfunding of government, of health agencies for a prolonged period of time, and it was from that report that actually came the idea of Te Akawhai Order. And so we've already had the Treaty of Waitangi principles examined in a health context, and it has been very clearly articulated by the Waitangi Tribunal that there isn't equitable health going on. And I think one of the things that we have to be, and I think the listeners really probably need to appreciate, is there is actually a difference in the terminology that David Seymour is using when he talks about equality, and when we talk about things, we're talking about equity. Yeah. And so there's a sort of traditional picture when you Google those two things. It's of the sort of three kids sitting at a fence line, and everyone getting the same box is equality, and everyone getting different boxes based on, and we're sort of talking about the same stuff, talking about needs. That's it. Yeah. And, the thing is that race in this country, unfortunately, does equate to need on the health statistics. I do a fair bit of lecturing around Māori health and equity within health systems. And one of the things that I say is, as I get is opening statement and gambit I use, as I sort of talk about asking people to guess what the life expectancy of my and I started with my oldest daughter, what the difference in life expectancy of my daughter is based on the fact that she's born to me versus if she was born to someone who was non-Māori. And the answer is it's about 8 years difference for females and 7 years difference for males. And that standardized for, parental education, income, all of these sorts of things, that just says that just because of the race that you're born to, my daughter has essentially an 8 year less life expectancy than not. And so you've got to start to say, well, what are the reasons that are behind that? And often it's not just individual racism. I don't believe people in this country get up every morning and go, I'm going to be mean to someone because of this, or this. It's just systematic, unconscious, just things that necessarily happen that mean that there's a series of failings that necessarily happen. So the purpose of, I guess, this is a sort of, and I guess we're in a long format, the purpose of the things that we're sort of, or what I'm saying is, we know that there's things that are ongoing here. And so they've been well articulated. And so then to have a bill to think that we're going to re-look at this when it's already been looked at is a sort of a really unfair misnomer for people, because it has been looked, it is really well articulated, it's not needed. It's got a significant cost associated with it. And, one of the things I said in that article is it's the government's bill, it's not a Seymour bill, because as soon as you support it and you're saying that it's going through by those parties, it becomes all of those parties. And what I have a problem furthermore with it is that if they're saying they're only going to support it past the first reading, is they're saying, well, all we want is division. All we want is something that's been well articulated to be hashed out in the public space. And what this does, in a health context, and the reason why, because, we loop this back, is as soon as people start to feel unsafe because their entire, I guess, constitutional right is being questioned or being re-examined upon the agreements that was, people are going to start to feel unsafe. With that increased level of stress, they start, it starts affecting their health in a variety of different ways. There was a really famous study in America looking at farmers who got income just once a year. They sold their harvest and they did an IQ test before they did their harvest, so they were in relative poverty right before they sort of got their yearly income all at once, and they were relatively well off after their harvest. And they tested their IQ before and after that, and there's about a 7 to 10 IQ point difference between those two time points. And so we know that chronic stress affects intellect. We know that it affects decision making, and that's not just because you wake up in the morning and you go, I'm making bad decisions, which is often, and that's that personal responsibility conversation. If we put people in stressful situations, they don't actually have the intellect to necessarily be able to make good life choices. We know that increased stress increases blood pressure, which then in turn can lead into strokes, into heart attacks. There are direct and indirect health outcomes that come from this. And so if you're not going to support a bill and you don't think this bill is worthwhile to go all the way, don't support it from the beginning. It's just divisive. It's just racist in terms of what you're doing. And that's what I think the real comment that we're making here is there is no good to come of this. There's no real reason for doing it. We know it's not going to, they're potentially not going to support it. And so why even do it in the first place? You're only looking to make trouble.
You've used the word potentially not going to support it. So it sounds like you're echoing some concerns that we've been talked about, that this government, they've changed their minds on some things. So they're saying they're not going to support it. But, we've always said maybe like it's an alternate into a, what do you call it? Like MPs can choose themselves, whatever the name of that is, just jumped out of my head. Bill, and then it won't be national supporting it, it'll be national MPs supporting it. A conscience vote, that's what I was thinking of. Also, so I have never heard this, what you just said. You said that there is a tangible and measurable way to see how people think and function from poverty, because of this research, to out of poverty. That's measurable and tangible.
Yeah, so that study, and actually the easiest way for your listeners to necessarily find it is it's actually in a TEDx talk, and it's well talked about. And and so what stress and what poverty people live in affects their life choices. And quite often, when we're talking about population health, we're talking about aggregated data and things like that. So when often we like to use people who sort of break that glass ceiling as an anecdote, and we might go and turn out and say, well, Shane Reti himself was a MAPA student. So what that means is he was direct entry for being Māori into the University of Auckland. And so, look, he did well for himself. Look, he's the Minister of Health. Māori don't need these things because they've done well for themselves. So they use anecdotes and single things rather than necessarily looking across the board that they're underrepresented in all these, for population, the number of Māori, there isn't that same population parity in terms of Māori doctors. There isn't the same population parity in terms of nurses, allied health staff. So it's showing that we're not making it into these professions, and it's not because Māori per se they're less intelligent. It's because of the opportunities and the ways that they're necessarily being brought up, and the messages they're necessarily being given. That whole sort of thing of you're not good enough, you should be doing manual labour. The blue collar stuff other than white collar. Those sorts of messages is that sort of institutional thing, and it's across every sort of sector, and they all have a role. There's a genuine appreciation for there's a reason why there's an overrepresented population in prison is because of sort of targeted practices and and the likelihood of being prosecuted and things like that.
We often say here, your anecdotal evidence may not necessarily reflect the data, which is what you're saying about everything's based on their anecdotes. Can you explain to us, because we hear various commentators, politicians talking about we're gonna actually allocate our funding based on need, and they seem to look and go, this group of people who have breast cancer, there is a need for that, so we'll fund that. This group of people who have motor neuron disease, there is a need for that, so we'll fund that. But when they go, this group of people who are Māori, there's a need, they go, we're not going to fund that. So when it comes to the need, the medical needs of Māori, how do you pull apart the need of the group? Because it won't be completely 100%. There's not 100% of Māori are going to need, this funding for this particular issue. So how do we look at the need for Māori and then how to fund it when it comes to their medical fraternity?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I think that would help make it clearer in other people's minds about why we're necessarily talking about this. That example of first up, that example of differences in life expectancy is number one, and an example of need. In my sort of other hat or other life I lead, I'm a haematologist, and I've just finished as second author on a study that's looking at age standardized mortality rates for Māori versus non-Māori across all hematological malignancies. And so, when we, and when you standardize for various different things, the reason that we see in the health system as there being a need is because, certainly if you talk about the hematological malignancies, there is a higher rate of mortality, of getting cancer, and a higher rate of mortality or death from those cancers, and you can't necessarily break it down perfectly for that. And so that again is very literature based, and it was only published this year. And so we know that Māori across most of the hematological malignancies have a poorer outcome and a higher chance of getting these malignancies. So you could therefore say that as a very easy mechanism of need, and you've just proven that Māori are an area of need. There is obviously a spectrum of differences in severity of disorders and things like that. But ischemic heart disease, stroke, Māori have get affected by those younger. they in terms of things like gout, Māori are often affected more severely, rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune conditions, so there's quite a depth of evidence to show that Māori are more affected, and when they are affected, they're more likely to have severe disease. But yet at the same time, they're less likely to be offered the same medications that a non-Māori is. So there is the biological factors, but then there's also the fact that they're less likely to get treatment associated with it. There was a group at the University of Auckland that did a study around prescribing practices, and except for musculoskeletal sort of pain relief medications, Māori across the board were less likely to be offered prescriptions and less, than their non-Māori equivalent. So we've got these internal biases as well, but these all build up into sort of this idea of what is and what is, but then, the system sort of re-engenders itself, because if they're more likely to have severe disease and then they're less likely to be treated, we're self-engendering what's necessarily happening, and then people end up on sickness benefits at a younger age because they're unable to work because they've never been treated in an appropriate fashion, and then the cycle perpetuates because we see these people on sickness benefits going, oh, well, they can't work, they're only in their 60s, why is that happening? But we've never supported them in the first place with the right medicines to necessarily hopefully offset their disease in the first place. And a lot of that sort of pharmac metrics, the opportunity to keep people working isn't built into a pharmac metric. So, if you're saying, oh, well, I'd like to fund a particular medicine for someone who's younger because it'll, and it might be oral versus IV, so they're not coming in as much because then they're able to continue to work, they'll offset their symptoms and they'll be more productive. Those sorts of factors aren't built into any of the pharmac metrics, which makes it really hard to necessarily recommend equity measures and a lot of the stuff that they're necessarily funding to try and make a difference.
Yeah, that life expectancy. So sometimes why I love these kinds of conversations, just the flow, Matt, is because you kind of get realizations along the way. And I've been trying to think how do we look and say, Māori need funding, because Māori have worse outcomes versus any old person who's got the same illness at that moment. But the life expectancy one isn't going to show itself until they're 70. So therefore, to address that when they turn 70, you have to put more into them at 7. More into them at 7 and 17 and 27, because you're not going to get that outcome, that KPI, as Mr. Luxon would like to tell us about, until they're 70 anyway. So it seems like, and I'm just thinking this out loud, to offset that 8 years of lost life, you need to address it when they're 7, 17, 27, 37 to give Māori a better chance to not have a shorter life expectancy. Is that a fair enough thing to say?
Oh, absolutely. Like if we as a country wanted to probably do two things that would alter someone's health, it would be that the first 1,000 days are probably the most important in a child's life in terms of setting up for their intellect ongoing, and then a universal income such that no one was stressed about feeding themselves. I think that the cost economics associated with that would offset a ton of stuff. And again, that's giving something universally, which again goes towards the need, because it wouldn't be, that's not specifically necessarily race based, but it, who is more likely. This is the problem, in sort of a lot of these conversations, is because we're talking about Māori are more likely to have this and more likely to be that, but there's still non-Māori who are in poverty and can't feed themselves, and there's still non-Māori who have severe diseases. And so, I really appreciate that conversation. But one of the things that we know is if you target a system for Māori, and you design a system for Māori who are the harder to reach and the less likely to turn up and things like that, then actually that benefits the system overall. And it's an easily designable system, rather than saying, well, we're going to design a system for all the people who we call them DNAs, or did not attend. Say you get referred into the hospital and you get a clinic appointment. We're going to design a system to try and collect and attach those people. But we know Māori are more likely to DNA. So, So if you design it for Māori, then because it's an easily identifiable population across that list, and then do it for everyone, then you actually do improve the overall outcome. So an idea of you design a system for Māori, you're designing it for all, is one of the things that's really lost along in the health conversations that we're necessarily seeing, but people get lost in the who's it necessarily targeted for.
Yeah. Just to bring this right back to the start, the reason that you as a representative of the Māori Health Committee are talking about this is based on David Seymour and the government's treaty principles, referendum, bill, policy, whichever word you want to say. We're hearing a lot from people who are saying there are no principles in the treaty. No one knows what the principles of the treaty are. A very quick Google search will show you that partnership protection and participation are a framework that they look at the treaty at the moment for the principles of. Are you able to expand at all or explain from your perspective the principles of the treaty as we know it right now? Have we defined them? Or the other thing is, and we hear Chloe Swarbrick say this a lot, yes, a conversation around the treaty is needed, but a binary outcome is not the way to go with it. So do we still need to have a conversation around the treaty principles, or have they been defined and are they working fine at the moment?
The problem is if you legally define them as they stand right now in 40 years, because this conversation, 100 years was different from what it is now. And the problem is, as soon as you define it and bind it, then, let's just imagine that we actually just really just got on as a country and said, these health statistics, these education statistics, these prison statistics aren't acceptable. We're just going to make it. We're going to make a difference, and we're going to bring everything, and we're going to aim for equity, and we get up to that. Well, then theoretically, when we get there and we're meeting what the treaty principles are, we're then going to rechange what our conversation is, because we're all at the same. So, but if we define them in law now, well, with it, to be fair, the Waitangi Tribunal has been going for how many years, and has been looking at all their cases. The treaty principles are very well defined. The problem is that most people I don't think are making the effort to actually look. And you're exactly right. You can Google them, and the 3 Ps have been quoted since I was at medical school, which was in the early 2000s. Yeah. That hasn't necessarily changed. There's been the occasional document that has been a bit more nuanced about them. And certainly in health, we generally get, we've got a few different documents that sort of help it a little bit more. If you're applying for research funding, you've got to be a bit more nuanced, than just the 3 Ps. But they are very well defined. It is very much about co-design. Asking how you necessarily want your service to be delivered to you, how you necessarily want it to look, how you want it to feel. And to be a bit nuanced about it, because Māori as a population in and of themselves isn't one person multiplied 50 times. They're equally like everyone else. We're all individuals, and so it's got to have some flexibility for individuality within that space as well. So I think this is trying to hit something that doesn't need to be hit for the sake of I guess to whose benefit, to what benefit, and for why. And I think there's too many of those questions going at a time where certainly within the health system we're looking for austerity and all the health budgets are dropping, and this has been quoted at $4 million for 6 months. Well, that could be a fantastic injection into health system, education system, any other system, rather than just doing a bill that there's no promise that it's going to continue. And I guess coming back to your original point, I completely agree. They've said the National Party won't support but then what? All bets are off. And governments have lied before. Governments have not told us the truth before. So that's their point. I guess their stake in the sand right now. But in 6 months' time, they might turn around and say, "Oh, well, actually, this bill looks pretty good, and actually, we're willing to support this now." And we've all been told a lie. The point is, at the end of the day, they're still doing this, which I think is for no good reason. And I guess when you go back to the flag referendum, how much money was wasted, and we're happy to accept that taxpayer money to just do something that doesn't need to be done.
Yeah, no. That's a really good point. And I think we'll leave it there. So thank you, Dr. Matt Wheeler, for joining us today. Some real good thoughts coming out of that for us to continue to grow with. Appreciate your time.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
All right, Chewy. Well, there's the conversation. Just reiterate one thing for me, because I have been struggling to understand this idea of we do talk about you can classify groups of people for healthcare, and I've been looking for that anchor to go, how do we justify a class, the group that is Māori? And the answer to that, I think, was in that conversation, life expectancy, because you don't know who's going to die early, but Māori in general die 8 years earlier, then you have to put more into Māori health when they're 7, 17, 27, 37 to try and help them outlive that shorter lifespan. And because you don't know which one of the Māori are going to die at 73 or at 85, you got to put it into all of them. And that, to me, that kind of feels like a tangible conversation over, because that if that's the only marker we take, Māori have a 8-year lifespan less than non-Māori in this country. So we've got to do everything we can to up that. So therefore, we can't tell which ones are going to die early, which individuals. So we put it into all of them. I just feel like it's been anchored for me now, thanks to that conversation.
Oh, 100%. I think that's the difference in life expectancy is one of the most damning things about the state of our country.
Yeah.
And look, I'm not saying that any of these problems are, wave a magic wand and we can fix it. We're trying to undo decades of systemic things that are maybe not even maliciously stacked against Māori. It doesn't matter if it's malicious or it's not. Like one of the classic ones, right? Heaps of good work done by the Plunkett organization for white people. It was a eugenics organization when it was set up. It was about taking Māori babies away and putting them with nice white families that'll raise them proper. It's this sort of stuff. And I think when governments look at this, and maybe they have some good faith attempts to bring some redress, but it's always piecemeal. When we look at all of these things, he talked about the first 1,000 days of a child's life as being super important. Just wrap around care, just throw everything at it. It's kind of where Plunkett had it right? Lots of support for parents and all of that sort of stuff. But we have one part of government might be looking at that.
Yeah.
And then what about their schooling? Okay, so we go into a European-focused schooling environment. We take ideas from other European-based countries, reading, writing, arithmetic, and all of that sort of stuff. And it's structured around how Europeans learn. And we learn about European things. We don't, there's been a lot of change in the last 20, 30 years about how people learn. And like I would put myself in that, I'm affected by that as well. Not because of my ethnicity, but because of my ADD. That wasn't a fucking thing when I went through school. So I was just a rebellious kid that wouldn't learn. But this is the sort of thing, when you get into a rigid way of this is how it's done, then you are chopping people out of that. And then we go forward a little bit more. You're maybe you didn't have a good upbringing before you got to school, so you're behind the 8 ball then, and then you get further behind at school because school's not set up for you, and then you get into secondary school where the safety barriers are more coming down. Maybe you get in trouble, maybe you have some interactions with police or other authority figures. Maybe your diet's not as good because mum and dad's wages aren't as good, or maybe they're both working, or maybe one of them's working, or maybe none of them's working. Everything is stacked against you before you even get to adulthood. And then maybe you haven't got the right education, you haven't got a great education, you don't get good jobs. You get menial jobs where you work harder, It's harder on your body. Your diet's worse because of how much money you make, because good food is expensive. Going to the doctor when you start to feel sick is expensive. So you put it off until you're more sick, more damaged, more hurt. And then you come across the systemic racism that studies have found exists in our healthcare system, despite all best intentions.
Yeah, no, and
then after doing all of that, you die before you get super.
Yeah.
Now, when you stack up all of those things and you look at all the, it's just such a big thing, man.
Okay.
And you stack up all of these big things, do we have a whole government, whole of life approach to any of these issues? No, it's never happened. It's always been piecemeal, and it's always until the opposition government, the opposition party gets in and they start fucking tearing it down again because we're all equal, remember? Man.
Me? No.
It should make everyone furious. I'm done now. I'm done.
Sure.
You go, Pat. It's your show.
No, it's not actually me. I was just trying to get some other people out there as well. Mata says yes, and if people DNA, so do not attend, they stop referring them for those who will show up. And this is the difference, right? Between someone who will go, well, it's their fault for not turning up. Yeah, if it's not set up for someone to turn up. It might sound a weird thing to say, but if it's made harder for people to turn up, and they don't turn up, that's sort of the responsibility of the agency, not necessarily the individual. Mata also says people are taking meth and making poor health choices because of their poor knowledge where it will take them just to escape their worries. We're about to show you that the piece that he referenced about the farmers, we're about to play you that. That's what I said I wanted to do. We're going to play it for you. Tawhiri says one of the reasons he hates it is because it gives all workers more rights throughout partnership principle. This is how it was used to slow neoliberalism. There's a few other chats in there, but we might leave them till the end because they aren't necessary. Oh, Anna's one is. I think we were talking about the Crown wasn't known for being honest with translation back in that day. And that comes from the conversation we had about exegesis and hermeneutics. Right, so we're going to go straight into this other part. Now, if you just saw that whole conversation there, he referenced the study. And in the study, he said the easiest way to do it is to watch it on a TED Talks. Now, I want to say this as well. The idea of IQ has been discredited by many people, right? But it is still a way to measure. Doesn't mean it's the be-all and end-all. It's like body mass index, BMI. BMI is not the best way to figure out if someone is a healthy weight or not. And if it was the case, all the front row of the All Blacks would be morbidly obese because they are carrying lots of muscle. But it is still a measurement you can use for some things. It's not the best. It can give you some ideas. It's a bit the same with IQ. So let's go to this TED Talk and let's have a bit of a listen to it. It depends how long it takes. I've got like 3 places we could come out of it. I kept wanting to pull out of it and it was another good bit. And it's quite confronting how he describes people in poverty, but stick with us because he's about to explain why people are in poverty and why they stay in poverty and what to do about it. The title is called Poverty Isn't a Lack of Character, It's a Lack of Cash. Now you might go, yeah, well, of course, but wait, there's more. The doctor just talked about a universal basic income. It's one of the things that comes out of this chat as well. Rutger Bregman is a historian and I believe the author of the book Utopia for Realists. That's why he's doing this TED Talk. And let's have a bit of a listen. There may not be a lot of interrupting with this, with me and Chewy. The whole clip is 15 minutes. We're not going to watch anywhere near that. But let's have a look as to what he's got to say.
I'd like to start with a simple question. Why do the poor make so many poor decisions? I know it's a harsh question, but take a look at the data. The poor borrow more, save less, smoke more, exercise less, drink more, and eat less healthfully. Why? Well, the standard explanation was once summed up by the British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, and she called poverty a personality defect.
Ooh.
A lack of character, basically.
Confronting at the start. Stick with me.
I'm sure not many of you would be so blunt. But the idea that there's something wrong with the poor themselves is not restricted to Mrs. Thatcher. Some of you may believe that the poor should be held responsible for their own mistakes, and others may argue that we should help them to make better decisions. But the underlying assumption is the same. There's something wrong with them. If we could just change them, if we could just teach them how to live their lives, if they would only listen. And to be honest, this was what I thought for a long time. It was only a few years ago that I discovered that everything I thought I knew about poverty was wrong. It all started when I accidentally stumbled upon a paper by a few American psychologists. They had traveled 8,000 miles all the way to India for a fascinating study. And it was an experiment with sugarcane farmers. You should know that these farmers collect about 60% of their annual income all at once, right after the harvest. And this means that they're relatively poor one part of the year and rich the other. And the researchers asked them to do an IQ test before and after the harvest. What they subsequently discovered completely blew my mind. The farmers scored much worse on the test before the harvest. The effects of living in poverty, it turns out, correspond to losing 14 points of IQ. Now, to give you an idea, that's comparable to losing a night's sleep or the effects of alcoholism. A few months later, I heard that Elder Shafir, a professor at Princeton University and one of the authors of this study, was coming over to Holland, where I live. So we met up in Amsterdam to talk about his revolutionary new theory of poverty. And I can sum it up in just 2 words: scarcity mentality. It turns out that people behave differently when they perceive a thing to be scarce. And what that thing is doesn't much matter, whether it's not enough time, money, or food. You all know this feeling when you've got too much to do, or when you've put off breaking for lunch and your blood sugar takes a dive. You know, this narrows your focus to your immediate lack, to the sandwich you've got to have now, the meeting that's starting in 5 minutes, or the bills that have to be paid tomorrow. So the long-term perspective goes out the window. You could compare it to a new computer that's running 10 heavy programs at once. It gets slower and slower, making errors. Eventually it freezes, not because it's a bad computer, but because it has too much to do at once. Now, the poor have the same problem. They're not making dumb decisions because they are dumb, but because they're living in a context in which anyone would make dumb decisions. So suddenly, I understood why so many of our anti-poverty programs don't work. Investments in education, for example, are often completely ineffective. Poverty is not a lack of knowledge. A recent analysis of 201 studies on the effectiveness of money management training came to the conclusion that it has almost no effect at all. Now, don't get me wrong. This is not to say that the poor don't learn anything. They can come out wiser, for sure. But it's not enough. Or, as Professor Shafir told me, it's like teaching someone to swim and then throwing them in a stormy sea. I still remember sitting there, perplexed. And it struck me that we could have figured this all out decades ago. I mean, these psychologists didn't need any complicated brain scans. They only had to measure the farmer's IQ, and IQ tests were invented more than 100 years ago. Actually, I realized I'd read about the psychology of poverty before. George Orwell, one of the greatest writers who ever lived, experienced poverty firsthand in the 1920s. The essence of poverty, he wrote back then, is that it annihilates the future. And he marveled at, quote, how people take it for granted they have the right to preach at you and pray over you as soon as your income falls below a certain level. Now, those words are every bit as resonant today. The big question is, of course, what can be done? Modern economists have a few solutions up their sleeves. We could help the poor with their paperwork or send them a text message to remind them to pay their bills. Now, this type of solution is hugely popular with modern politicians, mostly because, well, they cost next to nothing. These solutions are, I think, a symbol of this era in which we so often treat the symptoms but ignore the underlying cause. So I wondered, why don't we just change the context in which the poor live? Or, going back to our computer analogy, why keep tinkering around with the software when we can easily solve the problem by installing some extra memory instead? Now, at that point, Professor Shafir responded with a blank look. And after a few seconds, he said, I get it. You mean you want to just hand out more money to the poor to eradicate poverty? Yeah, sure, that'd be great. But I'm afraid that brand of left-wing politics you've got in Amsterdam, it doesn't exist in the States. But is this really an old-fashioned leftist idea? I remembered reading about an old plan, something that has been proposed by some of history's leading thinkers. The philosopher Thomas More first hinted at it in his book Utopia, more than 500 years ago. And its proponents have spanned the spectrum from the left to the right, from the civil rights campaigner, Martin Luther King, to the economist, Milton Friedman. And it's an incredibly simple idea. Basic income guarantee.
What we would call universal basic income, same sort of thing.
What it is? Well, that's easy. It's a monthly grant, enough to pay for your basic needs: food, shelter, education. It's completely unconditional, so no one's going to tell you what you have to do for it, and no one's going to tell you what you have to do with it. The basic income is not a favor, but a right. There's absolutely no stigma attached. So as I learned about the true nature of poverty, I couldn't stop wondering. I mean, is this the idea we've all been waiting for? Could it really be that simple? And in the 3 years that followed, I read everything I could find about basic income. I researched the dozens of experiments that have been conducted all over the globe. And it didn't take long before I stumbled upon the story of a town that had done it, had actually eradicated poverty, but then nearly everyone forgot about it. This story starts in Dauphin, Canada. In 1974, everybody in this small town was guaranteed a basic income, ensuring that no one fell below the poverty line. And at the start of the experiment, an army of researchers descended on the town. For 4 years, all went well. But then a new government was voted into power. And the new Canadian cabinet saw little point to the expensive experiment. So when it became clear there was no money left to analyze the results, the researchers decided to pack their files away in some 2,000 boxes. 25 years went by. And then Evelyn Forget, a Canadian professor, found the records. And for 3 years, she subjected the data to all manner of statistical analysis. And no matter what she tried, the results were the same every time. The experiment had been a resounding success. Evelyn Forget discovered that the people in Dauphin had not only become richer, but also smarter and healthier. The school performance of kids improved substantially.
We should, Nicola, you're watching, eh? Nicola? Yeah, I'm sure you're watching.
Seymour.
Yeah, so David, you're watching? Good. Make sure everyone tags them in this when these clips come out.
The hospitalization rate decreased by as much as 8.5%. Domestic violence incidents were down, as were mental health complaints. And people didn't quit their jobs. The only ones who worked a little less were new mothers and students.
The exact people who you kind of go, yeah, if you need to take a bit more time, you probably should. Now, we're just coming up to the end of this. As you can see, there's a good 6 minutes to go. It's linked in the description. You should go and watch the rest of it if you want. We're not going to watch the whole thing tonight.
The only ones who worked a little less were new mothers and students who stayed in school longer. Similar results have since been found in countless other experiments around the globe, from the US to India.
He then goes into talking about the US can't afford it. That's all we're going to show tonight. And then he breaks down actually how inexpensive this kind of thing is, because what it saves on the back end with things like fewer hospitalizations, and that it actually pays for itself fairly easily. So as I said, if you're watching us on YouTube, that is linked in the YouTube description. We've watched basically the first 9.5 minutes. If you haven't seen it before, go and watch the rest of it. But Chewie, had you seen that before? And if not, do you want to comment on it?
I haven't seen that. I will point out that that's the same person that called out all the rich people at Davos for talking about climate change, but flying in on their private jets.
Right.
So this is 2 ticks in his column, my friend. Look, I'm aware of that study in Canada, and I'm aware of a bunch of other trials around the world about universal basic incomes that suffered the same sort of thing. Either there's been a change in government, or they've put such conditions on that universal basic income to make it the data next to useless.
Hey, just
so
quietly, we might have just been kicked because people are saying that we've been TEDx'd and kicked. Keep going. That's why I was worrying about it.
Oh, okay.
Keep sharing.
So, in Finland, they tried it. They gave it to a whole bunch of homeless people to see what would happen. It was a success there. They've tried a heavily fucked with model in the UK, to the best of my knowledge, as well. It's like you can be honest with what you're trying to test, or a lot of these tests seem to be set up to sort of go, well, we need to prove that it doesn't work, so people will shut up. And then they look at the data and they go, oh, well, actually, kind of, maybe it does work. And I think a key part of that is the word universal. For the same reasons that we were talking about school lunches earlier in the year, like it can be attractive to go, oh, we're only going to give it to people in need. And when you do that, you create a stigma around it. Maybe the universal basic income comes in a teal coloured special FPOS card. You can only use at certain shops, that sort of thing. No, you make it universal. You make it a right. You make it something that everybody benefits from. And then the other part that you need to be worried about is the framework that people live in society. So is that universal income going to mean that everybody's rent goes up $400?
Yeah.
It's those sort of things that you have to factor in as well. Nothing exists in a vacuum.
Yeah, there are some interesting logistics. When they say, like, for example, to pay for all their food and accommodation, like if that was happening in New Zealand, what do you pay in central Auckland versus what do you pay in, Oamaru? So how do you work that all out? How did the logistics all work? But, if they can make it work, pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's that whole thing, linking back to the previous discussion. Yep. If young families in their first 1,000 days while prepping this kid for school have less to worry about, mum doesn't have to charge back to work, the kid's palmed off on family members or expensive daycare or something like that they have the chance to set the building blocks for a good life going forward, and then are supported. The benefits for society, for an entire country, are potentially massive. But we still have to fight that part of people's psyche of like, why should I give anyone something for free? Yeah. I've had to work for what I've got.
Yeah. Yeah. We got dropped on YouTube there for a wee while, and I've just got an email from YouTube saying streams are interrupted when copyright content is detected. After copyrighted material is no longer being streamed, streams are automatically re-enabled. So welcome back, Whānau. It's interesting, actually. I guess they've got copyright, but I always think about TED Talks as sort of a social good. But I guess they own them. And yes, we didn't talk over it very much. I'm sure if we had done 1 or 2 clips, it would have been okay. But that's pretty much us for tonight anyway, guys. Look, what I will be doing, just so you know, just from here on in, I'm going to leave this as it is, and it looks like there was a couple of minutes of dead air on YouTube. The full copy will be on Facebook and Twitter, and I will probably upload that clip, but I'll probably upload it once I have contacted YouTube. So it may not go up tomorrow, it might go up in a couple of days' time. But universal basic income, Chewy, I mean, the couple of revelations tonight for me is how that can literally change. Like when they give the tangible example of Dolphin, I think it was the name of the town, and also the idea of Māori living 8 years younger, which we all knew, but that's a tangible, concrete idea as to why we need to drive more money into Māori health when they're younger. In other words, Māori need more resources put into them at 0 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 30 before they get to 70 and die younger. So it's for me personally, I've seen the whole show. Some of you on YouTube haven't. I've enjoyed the show a lot tonight.
I guess it's also worth pointing out that New Zealand does have a very successful universal basic income program. It is truly universal. It's not means tested. It's got very few conditions, just age. You just have to get to the age of retirement. And then you've got a universal basic income.
Yeah.
So
100%.
And one of the benefits of that is very low admin. Because you don't have to means test it.
Yeah. Everyone gets it. Let's have a look at the rest of the super chats, and some from the start of the show, but we thought we'd leave them to the end. It's in the ballot talking about the toll road. Toll will be $4.60. So therefore, if you're going there and back, let's call that $10 a day. Let's call that $50 a week. So there's $2,500 a year if you're a worker that's using that toll road who can't use any other road. But no more taxes, Chewy. Remember, no more new taxes, just some new tolls. Who's going to open the road, says Brian. Nick says, was late, am sorry. Bubba has a disturbance in the force fee. Tawhiri says, we had a mini UBI in the universal family benefit. There you go. Mata says, the problem is National would cut every social problem. Kiwi Skirt says, you guys got unavailable by YouTube, so be careful what you're showing us. Like I said, I'm not going to change the stream because it'll probably have a 2-minute gap in it. But I will check in with YouTube before I upload the clip of the thing we've just looked at. And look, I know I've bitched about this before, but we did just kind of show 9 minutes of their content without interrupting it. The way you get around it is using it as a social commentary. We did kind of choose just to watch it. So we'll see what they've got to say. Sorry, I heard you breathe in, Chewy. You want to say something?
I was just going to say we could trial it by doing a watch along stream. We'll just have a pirate copy of Beetlejuice next week.
I've heard the new Beetlejuice movie is quite good from a couple of people. You seen it
yet? Not yet, but keen to. Looks like fun.
All right. Tawhiri, in New Zealand, we could call it the universal basic income. I see what we did there.
When I come to power.
So Bubba says, Pat, YouTube be out there here giving you warnings. Haha. Yep, we got it. And Paula, perhaps we should think about a ChewTube. ChewTube. See, Chewy, the name Chewy is good because they can use it for lots of things. So we should stick with that. Look, to be honest with you, I mean, we are thinking about, maybe having our own site and maybe going through our own site, but then it would be harder to get the same. I mean, YouTube has its ups and downs, and one of the ups is it feeds through to other people. So one of the clips we looked at last week with old mate from England, Piers Morgan, is up at about 25,000 views because it's found an audience because YouTube is humongous. So pros and cons. Live with it. They're not, actually, I'll be fair, they're normally pretty good. I've had a few kind of, we're withholding this because of copyrighted information, and I just say, well, we're a news agency and we use it for creating news content, and pretty much every single time they've gone, chirp. They haven't said that, but the same sort of thing. So we'll see what they say about this. All right, dude. My dude, is there anything else that we want to get out there?
No. I think that's it.
It's funny, we weren't even
for the next 2 minutes.
We weren't even watching it on YouTube. We were watching it on it must be up on YouTube as well. We weren't even watching it on YouTube. We were watching it on the TED Talk site. So pretty skilled. All right. Hey guys, lovely to be back with you again. I'm gonna say something confidently now, Chewy. Oh, that's that playing. That was me playing in the background. I'm gonna say something quite confidently now. Are you ready for this? And you watch it blow up in our face. I have finally figured out the issue with the outro song.
Oh, really?
And I don't think it's going to duck this time, and I don't think it's going to sound like it's underwater. I know saying that out loud is a dangerous thing, but we'll see you tomorrow night.
Is there any depth?
Help us settle a debate, whether it's awful or funny, even if we're all creatures of hate. It's a fine line that we're walking together. For better, push aside the temptation to berate. Let's take a note of the corners we stand in. As many points as the hairs on my chinny chin chin. When the news that we're watching is hairy, knowing all the things that we need to be wary of. Like the rich have their hand out for rewards, while the many have to work out what they can afford, and the rest of us ain't paying attention.
All right, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 o'clock for another edition of Big Hearing News. I'll tell you what, Chewy, that working group last night, there was another topic at the end that was an absolute cracker as well. I was thinking, can we do them 2 nights in a row? No. We'll think about that over the day. Thanks for being with us today, team. Love you to bits. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks, YouTube, for not clicking us completely. You and I will catch up, YouTube. We'll catch up very shortly. We'll catch you tomorrow night. Hooroo!
Cheers, fam.